What's up guys, this is Darkbblue, a gamer who loves Souls-like games, looter games, and every game that involves build making. This is my first video to formally share some builds. Actually, I have prepared a lot of interesting builds, but since I noticed that people seem to focus more on ranged builds and engineer builds, I think this video should be about mod builds. Though they have received less attention, they have insane capability. So let me show you the true power and versatility of them. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's dive right into it. There are so many choices for weapons and mods, making mod builds very versatile. However, other components are fixed and don't need to be changed across builds. So it's really convenient to change from one to another. Now, as the first part of this video, I shall introduce these fixed components. For mutators, there are 4 common candidates. Harmonizer is usually used with a weapon that generates mod power for your primary weapon. And for your primary weapon, you can use failsafe to get more damage, or feedback and bullet weaver to get more mod power. Feedback converts damage to power, so it's useful, but there is a bug preventing it from working with some mods, so that's when bullet weaver is needed. For accessories, I prefer Golden Ribbon, Malevolence, and Burden of the Follower. You have 2 free reign slots that can be used for survivability or more damage bonus. For archetypes, the primary one is Arcane, of course. Then the other can be any all-damage archetypes. While I prefer Alchemist, Summoner can provide more damage bonus, yes indeed, but it's hard to keep minions alive, so its use is very restricted. Among traits, I need to emphasize on Kinship, the archetype trait of Handler. Since many good mods damage yourself, please max out this trait. Then you can use any regular healing relic. And for relic fragments, the most necessary one is mod cost. Mod damage, since it's additive, is not always required and can be replaced if you have other needs. Then every mod build has a problem to solve: how to get enough mod power. And the best solution is always Malevolence along with elemental damage. As for how to deal elemental damage, the best way is Nebula. You only need to activate it once in a while and it'll attack automatically, making it the best choice for progressing dungeons. But for boss fights, you can also choose Enigma, Firestorm, and Witchfire to get more damage. And finally, Aphelion, the most unique weapon. Its mod is able to charge itself back against single target with Arcane as the primary archetype. Well, but if you don't have Arcane as the primary archetype, more targets will be needed. The second solution is Feedback Mutator, but it generates power only for the weapon it's attached to, and there is no way to charge the other weapon. Also, its conversion multiplier is not enough to self-charge single-hit mods like Helix and Skewer. So currently, its best partner is Tremor. There is also the third solution. You can use Explosion Amulet along with Explosion mods so that you set enemies on fire, and the fire can pair with Malevolence to generate mod power. But many explosion mods will simply one-tap enemies, leaving not too much damage for the fire to deal, so you can really rely on this method. In summary, Malevolence with elemental damage is the only recommended method. The other 2 methods cannot work alone but can serve as supplementary power source. Now that we have done with fixed components, it's time for dungeon progressing builds. All the following builds use Nebula to generate the power if not stated otherwise. So the first one, Aphelion. It has decent DPH, massive AoE, capability of self-charging, and a unique attack pattern. Well, let me further explain why this attack pattern is useful. Let's say I'm in the Lonesome Streets. I know an enemy is waiting behind the corner to attack me. Then I can light out the orb, let it fly beyond the corner, and detonate it from a safe location. As for the bad side, Aphelion cannot attack enemies too much above or below its height, so it's not suitable against aerial enemies. and the orb flies too slowly, so it's not suitable for open areas where enemies are usually far away. And a complicated procedure is required to deal damage, which is not suitable for when enemies are really aggressive and don't give you much reaction time, like Fate Palace. And lastly, it deals fire damage and will be resisted by fire resistance, so you can't use it in the burning Lonesome Streets. In summary, using the Aphelion means you are progressing rather steadily rather than aggressively, and it's outstanding in a complicated environment where you can make use of all the corners. In addition, I suggest use Enigma as the sidearm. This is because Aphelion can self-charge already, so it doesn't need Nebula's constant power supply. On the contrary, it needs Enigma to kill single distant enemy. Number 2. Tremor. I know it looks ordinary, but it's broken. It has massive AoE, a moderate duration, additional damage, and it lets out the first attack soon after being used. This means it is especially good against aggressive enemies like the Fae. The downside is that it almost cannot deal with aerial enemies. Well, but if a map contains only a small number of non-elite aerial enemies, you can still use Nebula to fight them, so Tremor is still a viable choice. In summary, Tremor is good against a large number of enemies and aggressive enemies, so it's a good choice for Fate Palace, burning Lonesome Streets, and infested root basements. Number 3. Space Crabs. You can release it to where you are about to arrive so that you can attack enemies in advance. And when doing so, you don't need to aim carefully as the crabs will seek for enemies. However, it doesn't have AoE, so not good for too many enemies, and it is a long time after you use the mod and before the crabs actually start attacking. So this is a similar drawback to Aphelion, and space crabs are not good against aggressive enemies. In summary, this mod is good in dungeons where enemies are too slow or not willing to get close to you, such as the infected and uninfected Asia buildings. And finally, single hit mods like Bloodline from Merciless, Helix, Skewer, and Prismatic Driver the Laser. As you may have noticed, the 3 aforementioned mods, though have different pros and cons, cannot fight aerial enemies, and this is why we need single hit mods for floating forests and root drones. But you need to know that they often lack mod power and are poor against elites or many mobs. Among these mods, I prefer Bloodline. Helix and Skewer deal too much damage against mobs, and the laser is too slow. In the end, let's take a look at these 4 builds together. They each have different pros and cons, and you need to choose the best one given a fight. I think this is the most interesting part of playing a mod build. If we compare mod builds with other builds, I think mod builds are the best for dungeons with many enemies or aggressive foes, well, which is the most common case for all dungeons. For aerial enemies, although single hit mods are a viable option, they are not the best. And for open areas where enemies are too far away, pure mod builds cannot handle them. But I'll introduce a hybrid build of mod and explosion that can solve this problem in the next video. Of course, mod builds are not only good for dungeon progressing. Next, let's see some builds for boss fight. So what is the unique advantage of mod builds in a boss fight? If you have played some ranged builds like Nightfall or Crescent Moon, you need to stand still and keep firing, since weapons won't attack automatically, and therefore, once you are forced to dodge, you lose some damage output, and the more you dodge, the more damage you lose. Indeed, this is somehow related to your personal skills, which can be improved through exercising, but it's also related to enemies' attack patterns. And there are bosses that interrupt your attack no matter how skillful you are. When you are allowed to keep attacking, just stand there and attack. But otherwise, it's time to turn to builds that give you more time to dodge. This is usually achieved with persistent mods, which last for some time, attacking enemies even when you are kept dodging. Here I offer 3 handy persistent mods for you to choose from. Firestorm, high damage, massive mod power generation with malevolence, and automatically chases the target. Additionally, it can pull some enemies in, even including some bosses. But it also blocks your sights and make it hard to observe bosses' movement. Tremor, moderate damage, won't block your sights nor damage yourself, but it's fixed at where it lands, allowing enemies to escape. And Witchfire, kind of similar to Tremor but with a much smaller effect area. Its advantage is that it can trigger malevolence, but this is not very advantageous as Tremor can trigger feedback. To be honest, I haven't used Witchfire for a long time. Of course, you also need sidearms to generate mod power. As for this, you can choose between Nebula and Enigma. Nebula is simple to use, while Enigma deals much more damage. You can choose both primary mod and sidearm according to your preference, as well as boss's characteristics. But I want to let you know that Firestorm and Enigma give the highest DPS. If we compare mod builds with other builds, skill builds using Engineer's Torrent is another prevalent build with automatic, persistent attack. They are both good builds but give you very different experience. Then I suppose you may want to ask, well, now I'm fighting a boss that I can stand there and attack, so I don't need persistent mods, but I'm bored with range builds, so are there any mod builds with immediate damage and higher DPS? The answer is yes, it's time for immediate damage mods. But first, let's adjust our gears by adding a fire rate relic fragment. The attack rate of these immediate mods are determined by fire rate instead of casting speed, and a fire rate fragment plus the haste buff from Golden Ribbon is enough to compensate for the fire rate penalty of Burden of the Follower. Then let me introduce our power suppliers and damage mods. For power supply, both Firestorm and Nebula work. 2 Firestorms provide more power than Nebula, but Nebula gives you a clearer sight. Then for the primary mods, both Bloodline and Screamer from Meridian can work. Meridian is already the limit of power supply, and any mod with higher power requirement cannot keep firing. Bloodline is better when you can hit weak spots, but worse if not. Also, Bloodline's projectiles fly faster, which is an advantage. The unique advantage of Screamer is that it ignores armors, so it's especially useful when fighting Abomination. In addition, even Bloodline hitting non-weak spots outperforms Firestorm plus Enigma, so immediate mod builds do have higher DPS than persistent mod builds. But of course, they are still weaker than ranged builds like bows or shotguns. Yet mod builds do have pros, like you don't need to mind reloading on ammo, or mod power rotation, or skill cooldown, and there is no damage decline with distance. Well, though it's still up to you whether these pros can make mod builds better than ranged builds. So that's every mod build I know at the moment. Mod builds have significant advantage over other builds for dungeon progressing, with the only exception as aerial enemies and open areas. Then for boss fights, mod builds' main advantage is persistent mods that allow you to dodge without losing too much damage output. Although there are also immediate damage mod builds, they cannot outperform ranged builds as for damage. In the end, all the builds in Remnant 2 have pros and cons, and the key to success is to choose wisely. Sticking to the same build all the time won't be beneficial. If you like my story and if you want to draw me into depth of games, just like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you around.